I would like to talk to you about a heart condition. Um, and the reason why I would like to talk to you about a heart condition is because, see, through interesting experiences, through conversations, I've been presented with a very interesting and puzzling question. What really qualifies us to be able to spread the gospel? What qualifies us to be considered as children of God? What qualifies us to be considered righteous or holy or acceptable in God's sight? And it's an interesting question. And it's really a good question because, see, um, we've been told that if we live a certain kind of way and if we live without sin, then that makes us righteous and that makes us acceptable and that makes us holy. But then we're told that we are incapable of going through the day without sinning in some form or fashion. Kind of confusing, right? How can we achieve this righteousness and this holiness if we're supposed to live without sin, if we're supposed to be sin free, if we're not supposed to make any mistakes or make any wrong decisions, and if we're supposed to live in a way that mimics Christ or mimics God in such a standard that we don't do anything wrong, but yet it's unattainable because we sin daily. I mean, we've been told this our whole lives, right? Man born of a woman has but few days and they're filled with trouble. If you in flesh, if you have flesh and bones on your body, you sin daily. We all sin and fall short of the glory of God. And then when we want to serve God with all of our hearts, when we want to get into ministry and want to serve God in ministry or something to that effect, then, we get gung-ho, we get the fire in our bellies, and we're ready to go out there and tackle the world and try to save the world one soul at a time, witnessing to people, telling people how good God is. But then, oh, you can't represent God because you're still doing this, and you can't represent God because you're still doing that, and you need to sit down and wait until you stop doing this before you could really go out there and spread the gospel. You've heard these things before, Oh, I'm still smoking, so I can't really spread the gospel because how am I going to witness to people and I'm still smoking? Or I'm still drinking, so how am I going to witness to people if I'm still drinking? I'm in this relationship and I'm not married, so how can I witness to somebody? How can I talk about Jesus if I'm still living in this sin? How can we? Where's the fine line between us being acceptable to spread the gospel and us not being acceptable to spread the gospel? I begin to ponder this thing. And as a matter of fact, God revealed to me on this morning that what it results in is really a condition of the heart. You see, if we go by mere deeds and actions, if we look at the content of our daily lives, if we look at the thoughts that we think each and every day, if we look at some of the actions we take on a day-to-day basis, if we look at all of the things that we go through in any given point in time, there is always going to be one thing or the other that would disqualify us from being considered righteous or holy or sanctified or acceptable in God's sight. Why? Because sin is sin. We as human beings, we as people, we categorize things in levels and in degrees. You know, some things are worse than others on the morality scale. You got your little bitty white lies, and you have, oh, it's just a little bit of gossip and everything. And those things, they can be bad and they can be a little troublesome, but they're not nearly as bad as, say, rape or murder or molestation. Those are really big sins, and those are really big issues, and everything else like that. And then you kind of got the intermediary stuff, like, living in a house with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and y'all not exactly married, or not really giving the way you should. These things like that. We have a tendency to categorize our sins based on a morality scale. And the worse they seem morally, the more emphasis we put on them to be considered bad and taboo and unholy or unrighteous. And these things gauge in our minds what makes us acceptable or unacceptable to minister to somebody, or to encourage people's spirits, or to be ministers or evangelists or pastors or teachers or prophets or any of those things like that. But see, God looks at things differently. Everything seems right in a man's eyes if he wants to justify his deeds. If he wants to justify his actions, we can morally explain away what we do and how we do it and why we do it. Or we can put it on a scale and say, oh, this isn't as bad as this, and this isn't as bad as that, or this isn't, nearly like this and that. And so we can try to justify one thing or another to try to sway people to think that we're okay to do this or do that. Or some people can say, oh, no, you can't do this and you can't do that because morally I find that this thing is detestable and this is appalling, where this isn't all that bad. But when it all comes down to it, when it's all said and done according to God, sin is sin. It doesn't matter whether it's the little white lie. It doesn't matter if you committed adultery. It doesn't matter if you murdered somebody. It's all sin. And because it's all sin to God, all of it technically will disqualify you from being righteous or acceptable or holy. All of it. So how then can we be acceptable? How can I get to a place where I can feel comfortable enough to share the gospel? How can I feel comfortable enough to say, hey, I'm qualified enough to become a minister or a pastor or whatever the case may be? How do I know that I'm acceptable in God's sight enough to go out and spread the gospel without causing people to stumble and fall? But what I find is, when it's all said and done, it's a heart condition that God looks for. It's the condition of the heart. You see, if we go by the deeds, we would all be disqualified because we either think things sometimes that don't seem right, or we say things sometimes that don't seem right, or we act in some way and sometimes that don't seem right, or we do things to other people that don't seem right. We don't have love in our hearts sometimes. We don't know how to forgive sometimes. We don't know how to just love on folks sometimes. We don't know how to give things sometimes when we're supposed to give. We don't hear the voice of God sometimes so we can be obedient to his spirit when he's speaking to us. All of these things would disqualify us. However, when we get down to the heart of the matter, you see, the word says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. When you resign in your heart who you are, who you serve, what you want to do with your life, how you want to honor God, if you want to honor God, who you really truly believe in, and why you believe in him, then that's where God can really work inside of you. When you can allow yourself to be shaped and molded by him and be submissive to his will and his authority, as opposed to thinking that you have it all figured out and that you have it all together and that you know so much and that you've got everything under control. When you have a stubborn and a willful heart, that stony heart that makes you think that it's just you against the world and it's only you that can get you through the day, and that it's only you who can trust yourself and you can't trust anybody else, and that you're only fighting this battle alone. God can't work with you in those conditions. When you feel as though you have the authority and the ability to be able to judge people based on their actions and based on their thoughts, based on their dress, based on their job performance, or whatever the case may be, whatever they're doing, without looking at yourself first and dealing with yourself first, God can't work with you. If you're the type of person who can't seem to forgive people, even when you're asking for forgiveness from God for certain things that you've done, and you can't seem to get past your hurt feelings and your harmful pride to forgive somebody for something, God can't work with you in those conditions. So really, what is your heart condition? Where is your heart? Is your heart in a place where you are willing to accept the instruction and direction of God? Where you're willing to bend and submit to his will so he can prune or circumcise your heart, cut away those stony places in your heart and fill those places, fill those empty spaces with more of him so you could be more and more like him and have more and more of his character. Are you willing to go through the process that it takes to get from the fleshly man to a more spiritual man? So in that spiritual state, you can hear God's voice more clearly and follow his directions and live as according to how he wants you to live. It's the heart condition that we need to watch out for. It's the heart condition that we need to pay attention to, because it's the heart condition that God looks for. It's not about your works. It's not so much about your deeds. You can continue to give, but if you're giving in the wrong spirit, then it doesn't count. You can sell, you can make socks for the homeless and knit sweaters and everything else like that. You can go work in the soup kitchen for 3 or 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, and all of these things. But if you got an attitude and your face is all screwed up and you're steadily complaining about it and there's no joy and no love in your heart, then what are you doing it for? It's the heart condition. If every time people are talking to you as you're walking in the church, or you're walking out of the church, or you're going into the grocery store, you're coming into work, or whatever the case may be, and every time they speak with you, you have an attitude, or you're steadily complaining about life's woes and how bad the world has gotten you under its thumb, and how you can't seem to make it through, and how heavy everything is weighing on you, and how you're so burdened down, then what are you really believing in? And why in the world would you want to spread that to anybody else? So everybody else can be miserable right along with you? That's not Christ-like. That doesn't give him glory. Matter of fact, that just has people following you in your state of hopelessness. Or maybe even causes people to stumble in some way because they're busy talking about you and how you can't seem to do anything but complain. So now you've given somebody else incentive to sin. I know we have struggles. I know we have challenges in life. I know things get hard and they get rough sometimes. And I know things can be overwhelming. But I have this Bible that tells me that when we are weak, he is strong. So if we just trust and depend on him, his strength is made perfect in our weakness. So by grace, through faith, when we trust and depend on Jesus the Christ, he can get us through whatever we're going through. If we just ask for peace through the storm, if we just ask for strength during the struggles, and we just put a smile on our face and we trust and depend in God, and begin to just talk about how good he is, maybe we might just find ourselves in a place where we're complaining less and less and giving God glory more and more. And we'll find ourselves coming out of situations faster and easier than when we went into situations. And maybe we can encourage somebody in the process and thereby change the conditions of our heart. You won't seem so miserable. You won't be so depressed. There won't be so much anxiety. You won't want to drink so much. You won't want to smoke so much. You won't want to find comfort and validation in somebody else's bed. You can find comfort and peace in the Word. You can find joy in worship and praise. You can find the love that you've been searching for your whole life in the arms of the Almighty, everlasting God that has been there ever since you were ever thought of. What is your heart condition? Where is your heart at right now? If you have an issue with your heart condition right now, if you feel as though your heart is not capable of forgiving, if you feel as though your heart is not capable of loving, if you feel like your heart is not capable of just giving God glory, then the best thing you can do right now is just go to God and say, Lord, I know that in me there lies no good thing. But I'm asking you, Lord, to come into my heart and change some things. Create in me a clean heart and renew the right spirit in me. That's all you have to do. And allow yourself to be open, to be changed, to be placed back on the potter's wheel so that he can shape you and mold you into someone who can love and forgive and be charitable and be gracious. it's available to you. That's what God desires. Don't wait until you feel as though you've gotten your life in order and that you've gotten your life straight before you go to God, because I tell you now, if you try to do it yourself, you can't do it. You don't have the capability. You lack the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding to be able to do it on your own. Only God can change the heart of man.
Yeah.
But when you allow Him to do His perfect work in you, when you allow Him to love you past your pain and to show you a better way, when you allow Him to give you every reason to trust Him so that you can go from faith to faith and from glory to glory, leaning and depending on Him, recognizing that every good and perfect thing comes from Him, you'll find that though things are not perfect all the time, though things are not glamorous and glorious all the time, things are all the time so much better with Him than without Him. And as He changes your heart condition, you will be able to endure things even better. And you could find yourself making it through in ways that you never thought possible. You'll find yourself loving your enemies. You'll find yourself forgiving people that you never thought you would be able to forgive. You'll find yourself being able to have grace in situations where you would have blown up and went off. You'll find yourself showing the love of Christ in all that you do. And you will be acceptable in God's sight. You will be righteous. You will be holy. And you'll be prepared for every good work. Notice I did not say perfect, because you'll never be perfect. But through Christ, you can be perfected. But it takes a change of your heart condition. When you're ready to change your heart condition, God is waiting. He stands at the door of your heart and He knocks, waiting for you to invite Him in so He can begin to renovate your heart. My encouragement to you on this evening, believers, is if there is anything in you that is not of God, be real with yourself and be real with the Lord. And if it is your desire to be acceptable in His sight, if it's in your desire to live a more righteous and a holy life, my encouragement to you is to open yourselves up to God. Confess your sins to Him and let Him know, Father, I invite you in and I want you to change my heart condition. Take away the stony heart and give me a heart of flesh so that I can hear your voice more clearly and follow your directions so I can live a more righteous and a holy life. Make me acceptable in your sight. Learn to forgive yourself and forgive others, and begin to walk in the grace that God affords us while grace lasts. Because, see, mercy endures forever. Grace doesn't. We're now in the dispensation of grace. So we might as well take advantage while we're here, while grace is available. Grace is available because He loves us. And he wants us to have every opportunity to change our heart condition so that we can have a heart that's more like his. So we can help others to have a heart more like his. So that we can all come back together in the unity of the faith and be together with him as one family, as one body, fitly joined together with all its members to be the church. I just thank God that he's got a plan for us. And that his plan for us is so much better than what we could plan for ourselves. And it is my desire that God changes my heart condition. I don't want to be the same way I've always been. I want him to change me daily, usher me towards that place in him where I can get better and better day by day so that I can be more pleasing in his sight. Because I love him and he loves me. And he loves you, no matter what your condition, no matter what your status, no matter what your place, no matter what your mindset, no matter where you find yourself in life, no matter your station, no matter your title. He loves you, and he wants to change your heart condition today.
8:05. Pause. But stop. Stop.